Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this beautiful Monday morning. Steve Dolan here on EastCountySports.com along with Ramon Scott. Well, Ramon, we're going to start today. We're going to do it twice a week where we're going to be doing Padres on Monday mornings and Friday mornings. Thanks so much for having me back. How's everything going your way?
Oh, Steve, just considering everything that's gone on, this is going to be such an exciting baseball season. I mean, how fired up can the fans be, right? I mean, we're starving for our professional sports in this town, and we're finally going to get it. And this has got to be the season. This has got to be it.
I would think that's ever going to happen this season and next season too, because they've got a great pitching staff here in San Diego. But next year, Mike Clevenger comes back. You add him to the staff they already have. I mean, just to go over real quickly, of course, the Padres open Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock at Petco Park against the Arizona Diamondbacks. It will be Yu Darvish pitching for the Padres, and Arizona has announced that Madison Bumgarner will pitch Thursday. Padres after that will go with, of course, Blake Snell on Friday, and they haven't announced the next three, but I imagine in order it'll be Grossman Hayes, Joe Musgrove on Saturday, and then after that, probably Chris Paddock on Sunday and Adrian Morejon on Monday. And Moni, if I could bring one thing up that I find very interesting about Madison Bumgarner pitching Thursday, the last 2 years on opening day, he has been the losing pitcher at Petco Park. 2 years ago for the Giants, last year for the D-backs. If he's the losing pitcher again this Thursday, I don't know for sure, would have to ask Elias, but I would imagine he'd be the first pitcher ever to lose 3 straight opening day games on the road in the same ballpark while pitching for more than one different team, if that all makes sense.
Well, let's hope we can get Mad Bum on another team next year while he's wrapping up his career, right? I mean, he's over the hill, so we're big favorites, and I love our chances on opening day to start the season. And great rotation. I think everyone agrees with you, Steve. I think that you got the back end right. I think Musgrove has earned that spot, the number 3 role, especially after his performance at spring training. Maybe we could talk about some of the things that happened at spring training in our preview, and maybe people who've earned a job. I think everything's settled in the way it's supposed to out there at spring training. Of course, we won't start the season completely healthy, as you mentioned, with on the shelf to start the season, Clevenger and Denilson Lamet, 2 great pitchers, more talent than this team's ever had is in this team's history. We've had success before, and we're going to have big success here, but unfortunately, Steve, that blue team is still in our way. And I can't believe it. Steve, I looked at some of the numbers out of Vegas, and I can't believe the Dodgers are expected to finish 9 games ahead of the Padres. 103.5 is the Dodgers win total. That's impossible. Take the under.
Please do. And Ramon, we're going to find out a lot about how the Padres fare against the Dodgers this year in April. The Padres have 7 games against the Dodgers in April. The weekend of April 16th through 18th, they play the Dodgers 3 games here, and then the following weekend they play them 4 games in LA. So we're going to find out real soon how the Padres stack up against the Dodgers. I mean, the opening schedule, like we mentioned, the Padres open up here with 4 against Arizona and 3 against San Francisco. Then after an off day, the Padres go to Texas for 3 and Pittsburgh for 4. And Ramon, I saw on MLB.com the other day, they rated like 7 tiers of teams. The Padres, Yankees, and Dodgers were tier 1. Tier 7, considered the worst 4 teams. Among them were the Pirates and the Rangers. So the way the schedule is designed, the Padres can certainly make hay these first couple weeks. They need to, because, again, the Dodgers are going to win a lot of games. 103, 104, I don't know. But the Padres really need to make hay, kind of like the New York Yankees do. The Yankees every year win 95 games, but that's because 15 of them are against Baltimore. You need to make hay against those weaker teams and do somewhat well against the Dodgers.
Well, it seems like as this team has been building up for this season and we've gotten better, we've continued to add people. And again, we mentioned not being healthy. Austin Nola being out of the lineup to start the season is key. It's probably one of the biggest keys. Those pitchers we knew, Nolan got the broken finger. He won't be out long, but people got to know him a little bit, but I think they're going to get to know him a lot more and see how important he is to this club. However, those games you mentioned against the Dodgers, I was going to ask you about this, Steve, because like I said, even though the Dodgers are expected to win 103.5 games, you can't win a half a game. I'm just giving you the Las Vegas projections. The Padres, still a great projection as well at 94.5. But beating those teams that the Padres are supposed to beat, something that for some reason it's such a San Diego thing, playing down to the level of your competition. Seemed like the Padres leading up to this year get so ready for those division rivals and the good teams, and then slack a little bit and maybe sometimes have not played as well against the poorer teams. This season it's going to be critical because, granted, if you can play these Dodgers, which are going to make for great nights of action for all of us throughout the summer. Those games especially will be on the edge of our seats over 20 times. But playing the Dodgers and at least earning a split of the season series, so critical, because if the Padres do stumble against poorer teams because they're not playing to their best of their mental abilities, maybe, if I want to say it like that, that's going to be costly because if for some reason the Dodgers get in the Padres' heads a little bit. Look, you mentioned how they stack up. How will they stack up against them? We know on paper they've spent all that money. We've spent our money. That's why we've got this team. We have the best team we've ever put on the field before the games are even started, right? I mean, there have been some talented teams, but I don't think anybody can argue this Padres team is the most talented Padres team on paper. So getting off to a good start against those mediocre teams is going to be critical as long as we can play the Dodgers to 500 at least. Hey, if the Padres win the season series against the Dodgers, that could mean a division title.
Absolutely. I mean, like you say, what the Padres do against the Dodgers will go a long way in determining who wins the division. One thing about the Padres, Ramon, let's go back a couple, 3 years. I think it actually started in 2018 when the Padres signed Eric Hosmer. Now, okay, has he lived up to expectations here? Probably not. But he was the number one free agent on the market. And then the next year, Manny Machado and Bryce Harper were the top two guys out there, and they got Machado. And then this winter, as you know, on back-to-back days, you're bringing Yu Darvish and Blake Snell as your top two pitchers. This team has slowly been building towards this. I mean, last year they made the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. And speaking of 14 years, that's how long they've signed Fernando Tatis Jr. for. So they're really headed in the right direction. But you mentioned earlier, the one thing that does concern me on opening day, Austin Nola, the catcher with a broken finger, he wasn't going to play on opening day anyway, but he was going to be the main catcher because Victor Caratini, who came over from the Cubs with Yu Darvish, is Darvish's catcher. But also concerning in center field because Trent Grisham out. And I think what's going to happen there, Tommy Pham, who used to be a center fielder with the Cardinals, I believe he will move from left field to center field. And then Jurickson Profar goes to left. Profar had a really good year last year in left field, Ramon. It surprised me because he's an infielder by trade, and last year they stuck him out there in left field, and I thought, oh no, but he was really good out there. I mean, they have those injuries, and another one they have in the bullpen, Pierce Johnson, who's one of their probably middle inning guys, may not be ready for opening day. But let me talk real quick about the bullpen because I thought in the offseason, after all was said and done, that the bullpen might be the weakness, but then we found out that all was not said and done because the Padres went out. They signed Mark Melancon, who's been a closer, who's been around for a long time. They signed Keona Kela, who's a closer in Texas. So they have those two guys, and you have Pomerantz, who's closed before. And yet your main closer is going to most likely be Emilio Pagan. So you really have four guys out there, and even Pierce Johnson, maybe a fifth guy who can close games. I mean, a lot of teams are looking for that one closer. These guys, again, have four guys who can do it, and a fifth guy maybe. So I think, again, I thought the bullpen was a weakness, but the signings of Kela and Melancon, I thought, really made this team a lot better.
There's just names and names and names in the bullpen, Steve, and you mentioned the injuries. And, the Padres have as many relief pitchers that are kind of injured or not ready to start the season as they do that are kind of active. And I think that, the nature of pitching, guys go down, they have enough relief depth. There are names all over the place, and you mentioned some of those guys, Pierce Johnson, and there are other guys on that list too that, may get healthy over the year and have to take the place of another guy. And so I think that that's going to be key. Maybe, just maybe, I think they are, Padres deeper than the Dodgers. Maybe not only on the pitching staff, but also with position players. Maybe if you broke it down that their top players are a little bit more elite than our top players, or a little bit more seasoned, if you will. But I think that depth-wise, I think that's where the Padres may have the upper hand on the Dodgers. So also, Steve, you mentioned that great rotation. And, I've heard the guys on the radio station break down every position for the last 2 weeks, it seems. I know what each guy eats for breakfast. I'm getting tired of waiting for it. But that rotation, I mean, come on. It's got to be some of the best pitchers, especially when they all get healthy, that the team has ever had. And you, Darvish, everyone's excited. Everyone's kind of reserved because maybe Darvish is a name that kind of sounds like he's been around for a while. We took a chance. We're paying big money. He's a Cy Young Award candidate, in my opinion, the way he's prepped for this season and where he's at on his career trajectory. And if he has a great season, he's going to have be one of the best pitchers in the league.
Absolutely. And Ramon, what's interesting about Darvish? Like I said earlier, they brought his catcher, Victor Caratini, over with him with the Cubs. I thought that was masterful when the Padres got Darvish, that they also got his catcher, because it's interesting the last couple years, since about 2019, Darvish, he struggled there for a while. He had a terrible World Series with the Dodgers in 2017. And then, the next year he wasn't great, but all of a sudden 2 years ago he turned it around. And I think it's more than coincidence that he turned it around when Victor Caratini became his catcher. Now, why? I don't know. But did it happen? Absolutely. So for Darvish to be able to bring his own catcher, I mean, how often does that happen in a trade? You mentioned, of course, that as Cy Young candidate, he was second last year in the National League to Trevor Bauer, who, of course, the Dodgers overpaid, who's going to get $40 million this year and $45 million the next. And then the third year is $17 million, which means either he goes somewhere else or they up that figure. But the thing about Trevor Bauer, you got to remember, when he was with the Diamondbacks, and I know it goes back a few years, the Padres did well against him. There was a guy on the Padres, of course, you've heard of, named Manny Machado. And Manny Machado was about 10 for 17 with 4 home runs against Trevor Bauer. And Bauer is, he said, Machado's the guy that owns me. So I'm not so sure how well Bauer will do against the Padres. I'll tell you what else with the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw, his last spring start, he gave up, 9 runs, 8 earned runs in just over 3 innings. I mean, he hadn't had a very good spring. And again, I get it. Spring training is what it is. But it's funny because I get a newsletter from a guy named Houston Mitchell with the LA Times. And his lead story was today, yes, there is reason for the Dodgers to be concerned with Kershaw. And Kershaw is their opening day starter. I understand after him you have the likes of Bauer, Buehler, Urias, David Price, May, Gonsolin, the list goes on. But, there may be a chink in the armor there.
Well, you mentioned all the signings and how this roster has been built. And you know what? We always think of the Padres as having a great minor league system. And they still do. They have one of the top minor league systems in the league. But you know what, Steve? This lineup is pretty much not the Padres. We've traded a lot of these guys away because we have a masterful general manager in A.J. Preller. And there are very few Padre original draft picks on this opening day roster, but it's not like in years past, right, brother? It's not like getting those 35-year-olds at the end of their career for a couple of $1 million like we used to do in those years. And the money it comes from, they've done a great job with the money. Padres pretty good television contract, and I think that's one of the talking points I want to ask you about as we roll on with the preview. I do want to talk about the team a little bit more, but I'll kind of represent the fans as the season begins and there are worries and concerns. How are we going to see our Padres, Steve? I ask you first, just as a representative, you're the man in the 3-man booth, if you will. Everyone, if you don't know, when you're watching the game and you're hearing Don and you're hearing Mud, sitting right next to him is our host, Steve Dolan. He's the man that is feeding them all that statistical information that keeps the show so informed. We already know how entertaining these guys are. We can only imagine Steve feeding them the one-liners as well. But as we prep for the season, and some fans are concerned about where they're going to see their Padres. And, funny, Steve, on the 31st, they'll rebrand. I believe it's still on track. Rebrand Fox Sports San Diego, the Sinclair Group owning them, and it'll be called Bally Sports San Diego. Interestingly, that is Bally Corporation. You can kind of see where this is all heading a little bit, I think, as the worlds of media and sports betting, one of my favorite areas, kind of combined. They've bought all these networks up, and I kind of see one day where kind of the viewing of games is kind of interchangeable with people who might be placing wagers. Now, you can't do that here in California just yet, but every other state is practically on board with this. And they got a great contract, but fans are concerned how they're going to see their Padres. There are ways around it. There are cheap ways around it. But certainly, Steve, on the talk shows, that's a main sticking point for these fans. And if there's any, disgruntlement with the team, it's regarding this television package. So you don't need to stick your foot in your mouth, but please tell us what you know about how we can see the Padres.
Well, all I know is that, again, like you said, it becomes Bally Sports San Diego on March 31st, and on April 1st opening day. As far as the particulars, got to be honest, I'm not the best on that. I would, definitely check around, ask friends who get the games and all, because they still are available in many ways. But you got to remember one thing, though. This has just started, the whole Bally Sports San Diego, and it's Bally Sports everywhere, all the what we call RSN, Regional Sports Networks. And one thing about it, what about the Dodgers? The Dodgers have Sportsnet LA, and half of LA still can't see that, and it's in their 6th year. So we've got it better in San Diego than they do in LA. And I'll tell you what, for those who watch, Don and Mark are great. If I could, a quick little anecdote. During the basketball season, I did several games for the CBS Sports Network. One of their announcers is John Sadak. Now, if that name rings a bell, John just got the Cincinnati Reds job. He's a Cincinnati Reds play-by-play guy. When I was texting back and forth to him and mentioned again about me doing the Padres stats for what's now going to be Bally Sports San Diego, John said, hey, you're the most fun group of all of the Major League Baseball teams, of all the ones on the air. So that's one thing about Don Orsillo and Mark Grant. They're great with the game, but they're also very entertaining. Very entertaining. But one thing I will say about both of them, too, is they're very prepared. I mean, I sit next to Don, and I don't get to read his notes, of course, but he's very prepared. He's got stuff typed out and all. It reminds me in a way when I used to do visiting teams, when I used to do the Dodgers, and Vin Scully. Vin was so prepared, and I see that same thing in Don Orsillo. As a matter of fact, I mean, I've been blessed to work with 4 Hall of Fame announcers. I mean, Vin Scully being one of them. I did Harry Kalas when he was with the Phillies, Dave Niehaus when he was with the Mariners, and of course Dick Enberg when he was with the Padres. And I don't know, but one day Don Orsillo may be in that Hall of Fame too, because he's outstanding. He was loved in Boston. The people hated losing him. And now we've got him. This is Don's 5th year doing the games on what's now going to be Bally Sports San Diego. So not only you're going to have a lot of entertainment on the field, but you get it off the field with these guys. And again, you probably know more than I do as far as how you can get Bally Sports San Diego. But I know it's a terrible thing to say, but be patient, because again, remember, we've got a lot better than people up in LA already.
Yeah. I'd like to think that maybe we've kind of taken the money that we've earned from our contracts and spent it a little better than the Dodgers. They're big corporate, and we're a little more carefree. They're careless and we're carefree, but spending our money wisely. And kind of interesting, Steve, I think in the backdrop, and I don't think it was talked about a lot or even referred to, but you know what? If you really think about it, the Padres, they're O'Malley, and the Dodgers, they're corporate. And who you're gonna side with family. And remember, the Dodgers were the great teams. They were O'Malley. And now, with Seidler, we are O'Malley. There's no doubt about it. We are the O'Malley team.
Oh, absolutely. As you know, his grandparents, he's got O'Malley blood. And I mean, and I'm not saying it had to do anything with anybody, but, ever since Peter became the top owner in the exchange with Ron Fowler, I mean, it's amazing. That's when a lot of this stuff has happened. And I'm not saying Ron Fowler held them back, because Ron certainly did a lot too. And Also with Ron, he's very involved in Major League Baseball, and let's not even go there because after this year, the contract's up, and I'm not so sure about promise for next season starting on time, but Ron Fowler's going to be there, and he's a great negotiator. And Ramon, one other thing I meant to talk about too, if I could turn the tables just a little bit. We talked earlier about the Dodgers, and I thought one thing that made the Dodgers interesting over the years, they had so many guys that could play so many positions. Cody Bellinger and Kike Hernandez, who's no longer there, Max Muncy, all these guys. I remember one day I did with Bellinger, and he went from like first base to center field to right field to first base. That's one thing the Padres have now because part of depth is having guys who can play multiple positions. I think of Jurickson Profar and Jake Cronenworth, and now they have, Ha-Seong Kim, who they get from the Korean League. These three guys can play all over the field. And I think that's one thing you need because the problem is when your bench guys can only play left field or can only play second base, when somebody takes a day off, you're really in trouble. But like, for instance, if Tatis needs a day off, Kim can slip over to shortstop. He's played there before. He did in the Korean League. Cronenworth's played there before. He did in Tampa. So that's one thing I really like about the Padres this year. Not only that they have depth, but their depth plays all over the field. And I think that's very important, especially nowadays, because one thing that's going to happen, we've already seen in spring training going from 60 to 162 games, there's going to be injuries left and right. And having the depth, I think, is one thing that's really going to make a difference for the Padres.
Yeah, I think him not earning his way into a starting spot, and I don't know, how you necessarily look at it. I thought maybe that I have concerns about Profar still out there. He's a good athlete, so he's done the job. And if he can hit, look, it's just part of the depth. He's a switch hitter, so that's big. But, the Padres signed Kim kind of to be under the radar impact player kind of for this team. And it's a veteran team now. So that's why he fits in. Yes, there are interchangeable parts. So I think that that's going to be a positive moving forward. But, we need guys. If Cronenworth, I'm not saying that was just obviously not a one-hit wonder. The guy's a great athlete. So to players like him to continue, we know that I think the big stars. You mentioned Hosmer. It's kind of interesting. We asked him to do so much when he came to the franchise, and he did have his struggles. But as we've added more top dollar talent, and he has a lot of protection around him especially in that cleanup hole. We've already seen his production increase tremendously as you put stronger players around him, way more consistent as he gets to look at real pitches.
Absolutely. And one thing, too, that's really helped is that Will Myers, had a great season last year, and he's had a great spring training. He had 5 home runs already. I think he leads the team. I think Myers is kind of back to where Myers should be, and a lot of that probably, again, goes to who's around him. When you're in the batting order, when you can have, of course, Tatis up near the top, and then you have a Machado and a Hosmer and a Myers and Grisham when he comes back. Tommy Pham. It just goes up and down the order. There's really not a weak spot in that order. Like I said earlier, I thought the weak spot on the team might be the bullpen, and it certainly got stronger too. So, Ramon, as we look forward to this season, I just think, again, in San Diego, I think this is the biggest hope that this team has had since 98 when they won 98 games. So looking forward to it. Looking forward again, like we said earlier, opening day Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And one thing that's going to be interesting about first pitch Wednesday, I just saw on KUSI News this morning, they said first pitch, it should be about 81 degrees. So it's going to be nice and warm, just like it was there in October when we did the American League playoffs for Turner Sports. So looking forward to a great weekend as the Padres open up against Arizona. And of course, when we come back Friday, we'll talk about what's going on over the weekend, what's coming up.
Yeah, we'll get together on Monday. We'll recap the weekend and preview the weekday games. Then we'll come back on Friday, recap the weekday games, and preview the weekend series. So we'll have hopefully a whole season, a full season, and what we hope will be. If we went 25 minutes so far, Steve, 5 minutes left in our show. We have not mentioned the pandemic once, so I'm just going to say it now, but only because maybe that's how we're all feeling. We can go 25 minutes and talk about the baseball season without mentioning it. It is in the backdrop, but right now, having fans, you saw the story in the paper today, and I got goosebumps because just seeing these fans starting to return to some of these venues, we're getting healthy, and look, we know that the pandemic's going to be around still throughout this season, but hopefully we just get through a whole season without any major interruptions. It looks like we can. If they can conduct that basketball tournament, only losing a couple of games, they probably didn't even need to cancel those games. Just take a person out of the quarantine the people, because the spread is really hard to do now until probably the winter months. So I think everyone thinks that this will be a great season, and kind of like hope springs eternal, beginning of the baseball season. That kind of all ties in together, I think, as the days go along and we sit down after our day of work and grab our favorite beverage, sit down and watch these games every night, because it's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be edge of your seat for the next 6 months, Steve.
Oh, yeah, and Ramon, it's funny you mentioned the whole thing with COVID. I know one thing they're doing this year is when you are on the road, you're going to take 5 players with you in case you have the people who have to sit out. I mean, one of the 5 has to be a catcher, which is good, because if you're only traveling with 2 catchers and you lose a catcher, you're in trouble. But I think that's going to be good. And I think the fact of the matter is, things are getting better. And I mean, the Padres on opening day can have 20% capacity. And I think that's going to keep going up and up and up. So we'll see. None of us know for sure what it's going to be like as time goes on, but just my opinion. But if people get vaccinated and as the COVID rates go down, you know that story. I think we're going to have a complete season. And one thing, if you lose a game or 2 here because of COVID and also rainouts, of course, there's still going to be the 7-inning doubleheader. The 7-inning doubleheader. So I'm going to give it, for instance, I shouldn't name names. Let's just say if the Padres are in a 4-game series on their first road trip and one of those 4 gets rained out, then on that 4th day you just play 2 7-inning doubleheaders. I think we're going to get the 162 in. It might take a little bit of creativity, but I think it's all forces go. Let's go ahead and look forward to a great season in 2021. And I look forward to doing this show with you every Monday and Friday mornings.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up a little bit. It was interesting you mentioned those 7-inning doubleheaders. I think baseball swung and missed on not keeping some of the rules that they've kind of experimented and implemented even in the regular season last year, that they've kind of backed off a little bit on some of the rule changes. So maybe I don't know. I'm so progressive, Steve, in our old age. Sorry, brother, but I've kind of warned myself to some of the newfangled things to make games a little bit more exciting. Of course, I'm anti-shift. I mean, you got to put your defense wherever you can, especially with the advantages. But it seems to swing year to year about the complaints about some of the things. Some years it's like, oh, the batters have the advantage. Now we're hearing about the seams on the ball and the pitchers having better control this year. We need to get those scores down a little bit, I think, as exciting as it is to get some of these slugfests. I think we could get a little bit more pitching out of this, and it might even help the Padres a little bit. So just a thrill. Let's not lay an egg. I mean, this is a lineup that it can't be beat unless you are the blue team. And hats off to them. It's going to be great. But, Steve, I mentioned those numbers, 103 wins for the Dodgers, 94 for the Padres. I would take the Padres plus 9 wins in a division race against these guys. Why wouldn't it come down to possibly the final? Look, I want to win the division, knock them out early, but it could be incredible the final week or 2 of the season.
Oh, looking forward to it. Ramon, again, I think, this could be, the Padres' best year ever. Again, like I said, they won 98 in 98, and maybe they go over that number. But again, to go over that number, like we said earlier, they need to be like the Yankees are with the Orioles. You got to beat up on the weak teams and, at least go 500 against the Dodgers. Because in the National League, really, because you'll play Atlanta, 6-7 games and the Mets like that. But again, the National League, the Central's weak. So I think the Padres will go over 90, that's for sure. But again, the one thing with them and everybody is injuries. So hope for the best there. And we'll hope for the best as we start opening day Thursday against the D-backs.
Yeah, win 98 games, you'll win the division. Dodgers will not win 100 because enough of those wins will come against the Dodgers. I think if I had to set a number, like I said, if the over-under is 93, 98, that's a division-winning number. Of course, 100 games, that'd be amazing. But 98 would be amazing too, because the number of games you play against division opponents, I think it'd be impossible not to have success against the Dodgers for the season series and end up with 98 wins, even though the Padres may enjoy success against many of the other teams. We still everybody downplay a little bit, the other teams in the division, but our division is still, going to have decent ball clubs, and for whatever reason, the series are always hard, even if those teams are a little bit down from years past. So great half hour, Steve, in Dolan's Dugout all season long, because I want to talk about the Padres, and I want people to listen to us talk about the Padres and gauge our excitement week after week.
Well, Ramon, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to being back with you Friday morning at 11 o'clock. We'll be right here. And again, just real quick recap this week: the Padres and Diamondbacks opening day Thursday at 1:10, Friday night 7:10, Saturday 5:40, Sunday 1:10. So check your local listings every day. Not every day, but look forward to getting going, Ramon. And thanks again for having us.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Dolan's Dugout twice a week during the Padres season, talking Padres baseball. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Have a good day.